Please welcome our mentor for today, Sai. Sai, bringing Sai onto stage in just a minute. But Sai is probably one of the best people I know in the Web3 space. My go-to person in Web3 and otherwise. Sai has had a crazy journey so far. I was in backstage. I was telling him that it would be impossible to summarize his journey in such a short span. But he is currently an advisor to Polygon. Initially founded Scapic, which was acquired by Flipkart, founded Cove Studio, which was acquired by Polygon, and so many other things that he'll talk about today.
So today, my goal is to perhaps go through the fundamentals, right? Like the absolute basics or the 101s in terms of broadly understanding what do we mean by a metaverse when we talk about it. What are the constituent parts to it? What are the ways that we can get to realistically bringing that vision to life? And opportunities, not just from a product perspective, but from an entrepreneurial perspective as well, in terms of if you're a builder or a product manager, how could you possibly view and slice the cat in terms of moving this forward? The metaverse is really a place and a piece and a slice of time, right? The slice of time is this is more important than that, right? Like the time that you spend in front of your phones is more important than the time you spend taking a walk in Common Park. And similarly, the metaverse is an extension of that. It is a space and a place and a time where you can live, shop, work, interact, have fun, recreational or commerce, and do all of that in an interconnected 3D world, right? And that's really the interconnection part is why people call this the evolution of the internet in itself, which is, think of web pages, right? Interlinked, interconnected, hyperlinks are sort of doing everything in terms of connecting you to various parts of the web. Think of hyperlinks to become portals, right? So the metaverse is really an embodiment of the internet where you jump in, you're an avatar, you bobble around, but the most important and the most exciting part is it's a complete reimagination of what the internet is, right? And that is sort of a lot of fun. Very quickly, let's also be sure to understand what the metaverse is not, or how is it different from the internet, so that as we start discussing about this, we clearly understand what's going on. On the internet, it's links and content. On the metaverse, you are the link, you are the active participant. A metaverse is an embodiment, right? Like a desktop or a smartphone is a very limited way to experience it. The true format of what the metaverse is here, right? In augmented reality and virtual reality devices. That's really where you go from a spectator, which is what the internet is, to an active participant in terms of what the metaverse can be. Which is why we take a lot of these gaming properties and we keep calling that the metaverse. Like, why do we call Fortnite one, Roblox one, Minecraft one? These are all virtual worlds, right? But the reason why we give them the metaverse identity is because we are present in that experience and we do a lot of things in terms of commerce or in terms of entertainment while we're at it, right? So that's really where the internet stops and the metaverse starts. An embodiment goes more towards the metaverse side, while an adaptation of content is more towards the internet side. Perfect, right? Now, now that we sort of know where the lines blur between the internet and the metaverse, what are the layers of the metaverse in itself? And this is perhaps the part that I wish to spend the most time on today. If you sort of really look at the metaverse, I can split that out to 7 odd layers that are super important in order for us to realize this. Are we today out there and actively experiencing the metaverse? Not quite. Now, why do I say that? Is if we were, we are not going to be doing this call over a video conferencing tool, right? All of us should have theoretically been doing this call over Facebook Horizon or Spatial. We're not doing that, and we're not doing that for a reason. We're not doing that because a lot of these layers have not been solved for yet. We're getting there, but it requires more work to be put in. So if I were to dissect those, let's look at it from infrastructure, your human interface, or basically your UX UI side. How are you making decentralization happen? Spatial computing, which is 3D engines and what is going on there. Creators and what role they have to play between this. How do you surface content? And what are the kind of experiences we can build around this? We are practically attempting to build a world theoretically in a digital realm from ground up. And that's no easy task, right? That's going to involve not just one company, but a collective or a crew. And that crew is possibly going to have billions, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars being poured into it in order to bring this vision to life. These 7 layers are probably a starting point for you to think and sort of break down problem statements in terms of what is relevant, what needs to be solved, and how do we take it forward. So let's get rolling, right? What is the first layer we're talking about? Infrastructure. A big part of this whole metaverse game has not been solved for in terms of pure raw computing and connectivity. So what infrastructure means is, think about the game that you play, World of Warcraft, right? Like, how many of you here must have been Dota players, right? Back in the day. If when you were playing Warcraft 3 or when you were playing Dota, the engine which was rendering the map could not even do more than a few MB at one point of time. We've since then gone to the Skyrim days, where you can render very complex maps, and then to the God of War days, where your maps are incredibly detailed. But now you're talking about world scale, right? You're talking about completely persistent layers which are going to be crunched and rendered not just for you, but multiple hundreds and millions of other participants on a persistent way that this is happening. Almost like the internet, but like imagine a 3D engine rendered version of the internet on one side, which is why GPUs need to become order of magnitude better than where they are right now. The second part is, even if you crunch and render that kind of content, how do you send it to the end person? You send it to the end person with connectivity. Today, what is happening is a lot of the processing is happening at a device level. This can be on your glasses or on your phones. The problem with that is your processor heats up, and that's not a great idea, especially if you're strapping something to your face, right? So you don't want to do a lot of this processing locally. What you rather want is a way for you to stream a lot of this information to the device, and the latency has to be small enough that when I move around and do things when I'm wearing a VR headset, it should be easy enough for me to refresh that data. That's really where 5G and Wi-Fi 6 are the two things that really become super important in doing low latency communications in order to realize this vision of the metaverse. So at an infra level, to compute the data and communicate the data, we require so much work in order to get us there. Now, so you got 3D info, you got the games that are built and experiences that are built on top, the devices you use, and the decentralization layer on top of it. All of this is kind of useless if it's not sticky or if it's not fun, right? We keep forgetting that people are going to spend time in the metaverse not because they have to, but because they want to, right? Like in the early days, you really need to give people a reason to spend time there. And that's really where the creator economy part comes in. You're going to have a lot of people generating some incredible designs, content, assets, commerce. And I think it's going to start with commerce and content. So think of this as a layer, right? Computing changes, content changes with the computing, commerce will change because the content is new. And what does that mean is, every time that the computing device changes, the way that the content is represented on that device will evolve. Right? Like think of how we went from Flickr on a desktop interface to Instagram on a mobile interface, and then from Instagram to say a TikTok, right? And when the content changes, the commerce changes, right? Like live video has become a big way to buy something now. Like social commerce has become a huge thing, and all of this happens because the content format has effectively changed. Now, similarly, the computing will change again. The content will change again, which is now going to be more 3D centric, more metaverse centric. And the commerce in turn will change on top of this. So imagine the next bunch of hustlers out there from a creator economy standpoint to perhaps be metaverse folks, right? They'll be able to build, sell, market, and get a bunch of things out there for you in a completely 3D world, right? Like stand-up shows, for all you know, can possibly take the metaverse side, and it's already happening. SNL is perhaps doing a couple of shows on 3D worlds as we speak. The sixth layer is discovery. All of this again is kind of useless if you don't have a place to discover it. Now, if you notice, this is a lot more like around how we use our smartphones, right? Ad networks, how we're going to have stores where you download a bunch of metaverse assets or worlds. How do you move from one world to the other and actually surface the content that you're going to consume? We are at the era where, you remember these PDAs or personal digital assistants that we all used to use before the iPhones came and absolutely killed it all. We're at the PDA phase of AR, VR, and the metaverse and the blockchain right now. It is primitive, but you see the potential that this is actually going to lead up to something a lot more interesting. Almost like how netbooks, if you guys remember, right? Might be a young audience here, but there used to be a thing called netbooks, which were supposed to be the next cool thing, right? Like built on a whole new operating system. Intel was supposed to, lead the charge. What happened? An iPad launched and practically killed that whole thing. We're waiting for a killer device in order to come in and take over a lot of the action that's happening in silos right now as we speak. And this killer device, in terms of a glass, is getting closer and closer than ever. How close? Think of it as last year, Meta sold about 8 million Oculus Quests out there. For context, that's more than the sales of Xboxes in that year as well. Which means you're already at a point where the virtual reality slash metaverse hardware industry is bigger than the Xbox industry right now as we speak, at least from a hardware lens. Now, how do we take that momentum forward and go from 8 million people to the next 100 million people? And that's really where so much of the work here is going to come through together.